In its celebration of American achievements in wine and viticulture, Copia, the American Center for Wine, Food, and the Arts, is showcasing the extraordinary variety of America's wine regions. And just next door to Copia is Sonoma County, one of the world's most diverse and abundant wine-growing regions.
At Copia, our educational mission with regards to wine is to bring it to the table so that people can become comfortable with it. And I think that whole philosophy is epitomized in Sonoma County, because Sonoma, to me, it's laid back in a sense. It's relaxed. It is still a part of, there's still country as well as more city life in Sonoma. And I think that people with wine need to become more comfortable and forget about the mystique and the myths that are involved with that.
The spirit of Sonoma County to me is a fierce independence, a simplicity. I'm an outsider, so when I came here, I could see pretty easily some of the differences in all of the regions in California. In Sonoma, particularly in Sonoma Valley, you have a certain irreverence with a lot of the vintner owners. There's some great old names in the business: Sebastiani, Good Luck Bunchu, and there's a real camaraderie and a spirit of fun and sharing ideas and working together.
Sonoma County is unique because we have great wines and great food indigenous to us. We have the greatest cheeses. We have Sonoma foie gras. We have CK lamb. We have extraordinary seafood. And with that, we have these wonderful wines that we can just naturally pair together. And the harmony between the two has attracted great chefs and food and wine lovers from around the world to this glorious part of the world. And that is unique and so special for us, to be able to live in a place where you can walk out your back door and get the greatest produce, the greatest bounty, frankly, of foods and wines together. It's just so inviting. Why would you want to go anyplace else?
Sonoma County has more than 13 wine appellations, or distinct growing areas, each with its own specific characteristics.
I think the most wonderful thing about Sonoma County is that it has so many mini appellations, locations, different kinds of soil types, that so many that we haven't even begun to count them, and so many that are, I think, successful for producing particular styles of wine that we haven't even begun to realize how unique they each individually are.
For example, in our experience here in the Alexander Valley, we've come to believe we make both a Cabernet and a Chardonnay. We have come to believe that this is an ideal district, that is to say the Alexander Valley, for Cabernet. It's not necessarily the optimum place for Chardonnay. And we have shifted. We have vineyards in the Russian River Valley, which is much cooler, and we have gradually shifted all of our Chardonnay production to the Russian River Valley, and we are much happier with the results. But that's illustrative of the learning process that has been going on for all of us in the last 30 years.
There are exceptional pieces of property that have particular flavors, and then we go back looking for why those flavors exist, and the only really honest-to-God thing that we can say is it has to do with the flavor of the dirt, because it's not necessarily what the resultant wine is that has made that happen, or the wine making. It's the grape growing. It's the grapes. It's something about that little spot, and that's why when we are at a loss for really giving you the honest-to-God answer of, I can tell you, put my finger on it, we use the term terroir. Terroir, which is a French term, which has a variety, and it has a variety of different meanings. The American technological equivalent is macroclimate. It basically is something that combines the soil type, the elevation, the exposure, the aspect, the drainage, the grape variety, the rootstock, everything that basically ends up being the cultural element in grape or wine growing that combines with a flavor. It is sometimes described as the flavor of the dirt, which of course, technically speaking, then would really be just talking about the soil type per se.
When you think of drinking a Chardonnay from Sonoma County, you will get the white peach, a little bit of the melon, things of that nature. Maybe not so minerally as other places, but just the raw fruit-driven characteristics of a given variety. The other thing I think you'll find in Sonoma County is that there's a great deal of emphasis, not necessarily on the technology of winemaking, but taking the grapes and just making the best wine you can.
Sonoma County is endowed with rich natural resources and is one of the nation's leaders in sustainable agricultural practices.
We are lucky enough to be stewards of the land here. It's a privilege, and I think everybody does feel a responsibility. I suppose that's what it is, that family values and how you take care of the land, it's a question of your sense of responsibility. It's incredible, and when I say we, I don't mean just my blood relatives. Everybody in the extended family. To see the vineyard people hand pulling off leaves, looking at each vine, concentrating, focusing. There's a pride in that, and a rigorous attention to detail. No job is too difficult for us to do to make the best wine.
The problem for us is that we don't have a long time to fiddle around and sort of say, I wish I'd like to, you know, I'm going to wait, it'll take me 20 years to get out to this point X that is really going to make me world class. Because in 20 years, that land could very well have just become a housing development if it's not economically viable. So we really are talking about really having to go very fast, very quickly. And we have gone very fast in 30 years. I mean, Sonoma County has defined areas that in a normal train of thinking would never have happened. But people are partially driven by just the fact that they can't just sort of say, well, you have to wait 10 years to find out how good we're going to be. It doesn't work that way. You have to come smoking right out of the barrel. But it's hubris to just think it's all about human beings. It isn't about human beings. It's about this thing that Luther Burbank said that, you know, this is, you know, the garden spot of the world. That wasn't created by human beings. That was created by whatever higher being there may be that makes this as beautiful and wonderful as it is. All we are is here is we're just sort of shepherding the process along.
We saw that where there was a time when there was no family business, and some of the things that would happen as a result was, you know, family moves here, family moves there, they lose touch, and before we know it, people have gone in so many different directions, and you never know what happens to them. And this has really brought everyone back together.
We're still a family winery. We want to be here many generations from now. At least that's the current desire. And we find that we have leadership within the family dedicated, and having learned the same culture, dedicated to perpetuating it.
Copia and Sonoma County wineries are joined in their mutual desire to educate their visitors and increase appreciation of the integral role that wine plays in our culture.
The first culture was really agriculture, and it was only when we sat still long enough to find a place to live and plant and harvest and cook that we then had time to write, to create a language, to write poetry, to create sculpture, to create architecture. So the linkage of agriculture with material culture is very strong. It's basically the history of civilization, but it all comes out in the form of food and wine as a food.
The major impediment in America to really integrating wine and food as part of our culture is basically the lack of exposure, I believe, to the average American to that experience for all intents and purposes. And there are, if you think about us, those of us who are really passionate about wine and food, we represent such an infinitesimally small minority of Americans. So every time we do anything, we are making an impact.
You know, you can go to the public school system or even the private school system. Food and wine are not being taught, and yet it is fundamental to our lives. And once you get it, once you start tasting, once you start on this path of learning, and it's an epiphany to us. You can talk to almost everybody who's come across food and wine, and they get animated. They start talking about it, and they want to trade recipes, and they want to know. You met them for like 1 minute, and they want to invite you over to your house. You know, that's the catalyst that I think Copia is supplying. Is that once you start learning just even a little bit, and that's what a catalyst is. It gets you started, and once you get going, then the mirth and merriment begins.
Copia and Sonoma can both relate to the visitor. If the visitor goes to Sonoma or they go to Copia, they can help them to understand a little bit more about wine, a little bit more about food, and how those two things together bring out the best of life.
And so it brings me a lot of satisfaction to know that 50 years or 100 years from now, what we have done here will still be bringing pleasure to people, and that makes me feel good about the endeavor.
Copia represents, you know, you've got this river of gold, but it's in all of us, and we just have not tapped it. And it's so simple, and yet it seems to, people just don't slow their lives down enough. And the saddest thing you can hear is when people get to the point in their lives they think, you know, I can't believe I've wasted 50 years, and now I'm enjoying this.
At Copia, we have programs here at the Wine Spectator tasting table, and we do highlight the wines from Sonoma, and we invite wineries in to present their wine and to talk about it, to help educate the public that comes to Copia. And the public's very interested in learning about that. And then what we try to do is to also give that audience a taste of the origin of that particular wine or that particular winery or that particular region of California or wherever the wine comes from.
The emphasis is not on picking apart the wine and trying to dissect it and, you know, figure out all the different chemical attributes, whatever. It's just enjoying wine for its intrinsic pleasure and its ability to pair well with food and make the food taste better.
For me, I feel incredibly proud that I've been able to work with an extraordinary team of people all over North America to create the first cultural institution devoted to food and wine with the arts in the world. And we all know that cultural organizations that are nonprofit today are very difficult to sustain, you know, given economies, given priorities, given the social issues of the world. And it really will take all of our hands all over the country to make this cultural institution work. So I invite everyone to celebrate Copia, to celebrate the idea of Copia, and to help make it what it will be.